A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. Chapter 2. Pip's hand strayed from the keyboard, her index fingers hovering over the W and H as she strained to listen to the commotion downstairs. A crash, heavy footsteps, skidding claws, and under-restrained boyish giggles. In the next second it all became clear. "Joshua! Why's the dog wearing one of my shirts?" came Victor's buoyant shout, the sound floating up through Pip's carpet. Pip snort-laughed as she clicked save on her production log and closed the lid of her laptop. It was a time-honored daily crescendo from the moment her dad returned from work. He was never quiet. His whispers could be heard across the room, his whooping knee slap, laugh so hard it actually made people flinch, and every year without fail Pip woke up to the sound of him tiptoeing the upstairs corridor to deliver Santa's stockings on Christmas Eve. Her stepdad was the living adversary of subtlety. Downstairs, Pip found the scene mid-production. Joshua was running from room to room, from the kitchen to the hallway and into the living room, on repeat, cackling as he went. Close behind was Barney, the golden retriever, wearing Pip's dad's loudest shirt, the blindingly green-patterned one he'd brought during their last trip to Nigeria. The dog skidded elatedly across the polished oak in the hall, excitement whistling through his teeth. And bringing up the rear was Victor in his grey Hugo Boss three-piece suit, charging all 6.5 feet of himself after the dog and the boy, his laugh in wild, climbing, scaling bursts. Their very own Amobi-made, homemade Scooby-Doo montage. "Oh my God, I was trying to do homework," Pip said, smiling as she jumped back to avoid being mopped down by the convoy. Barney stopped for a moment to headbutt her shin and then scampered off to jump on Dad and Josh as they collapsed down together on the sofa. "Hello, Pickle," Victor said, patting the sofa beside him. "Hi, Dad. You were so quiet I didn't even know you were home. My Pipsicle, you were too clever to recycle a joke." She sat down next to them, Josh and her dad's worn-out breaths making the sofa cushion swell and sink against the back of her legs. Josh started excavating in his right nostril, and Dad batted his hand away. "How were your days then?" he asked, setting Josh off on a graphic spiel about the football games he'd played earlier. Pip zoned out. She had already heard it all in the car when she picked Josh up from the club. She'd only been half listening, distracted by the way the replacement coach had stared bewilderedly at her lily-white skin when she pointed out which of the 9-year-old was hers and said, "I'm Joshua's sister." She should have been used to it by now, but the lingering stares, lingering looks while people tried to work out the logistics of her family, the numbers and hedged words scribbled across the family line. The giant Nigerian man was quite evidently her stepfather and Joshua her half-brother. But Pip didn't like using those words, those cold technicalities. The people you love weren't algebra, to be calculated, subtracted, or held at arm's length across a decimal point. Victor and Josh weren't just 3/8 hers. Not just 40% family, they were fully hers. Her dad and her annoying little brother. Her real father, the man that lent the Fitz to her name, died in a car accident when she was 10 months old. And though Pip sometimes nodded and smiled when her mum would ask whether she remembered the way her father hummed while he brushed his teeth, or how he'd laughed when Pip's second spoken word was poo, she didn't remember him. But sometimes remembering isn't for yourself. Sometimes you do it just to make someone else smile. Those lies were allowed. "And how's the project going, Pip?" Victor turned to her as he unbuttoned the shirt from the dog. It's okay, she said. I'm just looking up the background and typing up at the moment. I did go to see Ravi Singh in the morning. Oh, and? He was busy, but he said I could go back on Friday. I wouldn't, Josh said in a cautionary tone. That's because you're a judgmental, prepubescent boy who still thinks little people live inside traffic lights. Pip looked at him. The Singhs haven't done anything wrong. Her dad stepped in. Joshua, try to imagine if everyone judged you because of something your sister had done. All Pip ever does is homework. Pip executed a perfect arm-swung cushion lob into Joshua's face. Victor held the boy's arms down as he squirmed to retaliate, tickling his ribs. Why is Mom not back yet? Asked Pip, teasing the restrained Josh by floating her fluffy socked foot near his face. She was going straight from work to Boozy Mom's book club, Dad said. Meaning we can have pizza for dinner? Pip asked. And suddenly the friendly fire was forgotten and she and Josh were in the same battalion again. He jumped up and hooked his arm through hers, looking imploringly at their dad. Of course, Victor said, patting his backside with a grin. How else am I to keep growing this junk in my trunk? Dad, Pip groaned, admonishing her past self for ever teaching him that phrase. Production log. Entry 2. What happened next in the Andy Bell case is quite confusing to glean from the newspaper reports. There are gaps I will have to fill with guesswork and rumors until the picture becomes clearer from any later interviews. Hopefully Ravi and Naomi, who was one of Sal's best friends, can assist with this. Using what Angela said, presumably after taking statements from the Bell family and thoroughly searching their residence, the police asked for details of Andy's friends. From some serious historical Facebook stalking, it looks like Andy's best friends were two girls called Chloe Burt and Emma Hutton. Here's my advice. Emma Hutton, Sal Singh, and 87 others liked. View 6 more comments. Emma Hutton. Oh my god, Auntie, you're literally incred. So beautiful. 7 April 2012 at 10:34 p.m. Chloe Birch. FFS. I wish I didn't have to be in the pics with you. Give me your face. April 7, 2012 at 10:42 p.m. Andy Bell. No, thanks. April 7, 2012 at 11:22 p.m. Emma Hutton. Auntie, can we take a nice one of the three of us at the next calamity? Need new profile. 7 April 2012 at 11:27 p.m. This post is from 2 weeks before Andy disappeared. It looks like neither Chloe nor Emma live in Little Clinton anymore. Maybe private messaging them and see if they'll do a phone interview? Chloe and Emma did a lot on that first weekend, 21st and 22nd, to help spread the Thames Valley Police Twitter campaign #FindAndy. I don't think it's too big of a leap to assume that police contacted Chloe and Emma either on the Friday night or on Saturday morning. What they said to the police, I don't know. Hopefully I can find out. We do know that the police spoke to Andy's boyfriend at the time. His name was Sal Singh and he was attending his final year at Clinton Grammar alongside Andy. At some point on Saturday, the police contacted Sal. Dr. Richard Hawkins confirmed that doctors had questioned Salil Singh on Saturday, 21st of April. They questioned him as to his whereabouts for the previous night, particularly the period of time in which it is believed Andy went missing. That night, Sal had been hanging out at his friend Max Hastings' house. He was with his 4 best friends, Naomi Ward, Jake Lawrence, Millie Simpson, and Max. Again, I need to check this with Naomi next week, but I think Sal told the police that he left Max's house at around 12:15 a.m. He walked home and his father, Mohan Singh, confirmed that Sal returned home at approximately 12:50 a.m. Note: the distance between Max's house, Tudor Lane, and Sal's Grove Place takes about 30 minutes to walk, Google says. The police confirmed Sal's alibi with his 4 friends over the weekend. Missing posters went up. House-to-house inquiries started on the Sunday. On the Monday, 100 volunteers helped the police carry out searches in the local woodland. I've seen the news footage. A whole ant line of people in the woods calling her name. Later in the day, forensic teams were spotted going into the Bell residence. And on the Tuesday, everything changed. I think chronologically, it is the best way to consider the events of that day and those that followed, even though we, as a town, learned the details out of order and jumbled. Mid-morning, Naomi Ward, Max Hastings, Jake Lawrence, and Millie Simpson contacted the police from school and confessed to providing false information. They said that Sal had asked them to lie that he actually left Max's house around 10:30 on the night and he disappeared. I don't know for sure what the correct police procedure would have been, but I'm guessing that at that point, Sal became the number 1 suspect. But they couldn't find him. Sal wasn't at school and he wasn't at home. He wasn't answering his phone. It later transpired, however, that Sal had sent a text to his father that morning, though he was ignoring all other calls. The press would refer to this as confession text. That Tuesday evening, one of the police teams searching for Andy found a body in the woods. It was Sal. He had killed himself. The press never reported the method by which Sal committed suicide, but by the power of high school rumor, I know, as did every other student at Clinton at the time. Sal walked into the woods near his home, took a load of sleeping pills, and placed a plastic bag over his head, secured by an elastic band around his neck. He suffocated while unconscious. At the police press conference later that night, no mention of Sal was made. The police only revealed that bit of information about CCTV imaging, placing Andy as driving away from her home at 10:40 p.m. On the Wednesday, Andy's car was found parked on a small residential road, Romer Close. It wasn't until the following Monday that a police spokeswoman revealed the following. I have an update on the Andy Bell investigation. As a result of recent intelligence and forensic information, we have strong reason to suspect that a young man named Salil Singh, aged 18, was involved in Andy's abduction and murder. The evidence would have been sufficient to arrest and charge the suspect had he not died before proceedings could be initiated. Police are not looking for anyone else in relation to Andy's disappearance, but our search for Andy will continue unabated. Our thoughts go out to the Bell family and our deepest sympathies for the devastation this update has caused them. Their sufficient evidence was as follows. They found Andy's mobile phone on Sal's body. Forensic tests found traces of Andy's blood under the fingernails of his right middle and index fingers. Andy's blood was also discovered in the boot of her abandoned car. Sal's fingerprints were found around the dashboard and the steering wheels alongside prints from Andy and the rest of the Bell family. The evidence, they said, would have been enough to charge Sal, and police would have hoped to secure a conviction in court, but Sal was dead, so there was no trial and no guilty conviction. No defense either. In the following weeks, there were more searches of the woodland areas in and around Little Clinton. Searches using cadaver dogs. Police divers in the river Kilbourne, but Andy's body was never found. The Andy Bell missing persons case was administratively closed in the middle of June 2012. A case may be administratively closed only if the supporting documentation contained sufficient evidence to charge had the offender not died before the investigation could be completed. The case may be reopened whenever new evidence or leads develop. Off to the cinema in 15 minutes, another superhero film that Josh has emotionally blackmailed us to see. But there is just one final part to the background of the Andy Bell/Sal Singh case, I'm on a roll. 18 months after Andy Bell's case was administratively closed, the police filed a report to the local coroner. In cases like these, it is up to the coroner to decide whether further investigation into the death is required based on their belief that the person is likely to be dead and that sufficient time has elapsed. The coroner will then apply to the Secretary of State for Justice under the Coroners Act 1988, Section 15, for an inquest with no body. Where there is no body, an inquest will rely mostly on evidence provided by the police and whether the senior officers of the investigation believe the person missing is dead. An inquest is a legal inquiry into the medical cause and circumstances of death. It cannot blame individuals for the death or establish criminal liability on the part of any named individual. At the end of the inquest, January 2014, the coroner returned a verdict of unlawful killing and Andy Bell's death certificate was issued. An unlawful killing verdict means the person was killed by an unlawful act by someone, or more specifically, death by murder, manslaughter, infanticide, or death by dangerous driving. This is where everything ends. Andy Bell has been legally declared dead, despite her body has never been found. Given the circumstances, we can presume that the unlawful killing verdict refers to the murder. After Andy's inquest, a statement from the Crown Prosecution Service said the case against Salil Singh would have been based on circumstantial and forensic evidence. It is not for the CPS to state whether Salil Singh killed Andy Bell or not. That would have been a jury's job to decide. So even though there has never been a trial, even though no head juror has ever stood up, sweaty palmed and adrenaline pumped and declared, "We the jury find the defendant guilty." Even though Sal never had the chance to defend himself, he's guilty. Not in the legal sense, but in all the other ways that truly matter. When you ask people in town what happened to Andy Bell, they'll probably tell you without hesitation. She was murdered by Salil Singh. No allegedly, no might have, no probably, no most likely. He did it, they say. Sal Singh killed Andy. But I am just not so sure. Next log. Possibly look at what the prosecution case against Sal Singh might have looked if it went to the court. Then start pecking away and pulling holes in it. So this was the end of chapter 2. We'll be back with chapter 3.